Hello to the folks online. Our third speaker today, is Andrew Swift, and we're super thrilled to have Andrew here. Andrew Swift has had more than 20 years experience, 24 years experience, and in our industry, and it's completed more than 3,000 illustrations. He received a Bachelor of Science in Biology and later on studied figure drawing at the Art Students League of New York, and then enrolled in the Master of Science in Medical Illustration program at the Medical College of Georgia, which is now Augusta University. He has worked for many pharma companies as well as educational publishers and institutions. His illustration work has won numerous awards, including 3 Best of Show awards from the Association of Medical Illustrators. I always love seeing Andrew's work. It's always amazingly observed, and hopefully we'll see examples of that today. Andrew is a frequent contributor to Scientific American magazine, The Scientist magazine, as well as other scientific publications. Andrew also has teaching experience. He taught for 10 years as an associate professor at the Medical College of Georgia. He currently works as, I'm sorry, I don't know your title at ISOPHON. Director of Medical Science. There we go. Andrew's a certified medical illustrator, and in 2009 was recognized as a fellow of the Association of Medical Illustrators. And he is very generous with his time and his experience, and has lectured on the topics of digital painting, digital sculpting, and the role of diagnostic imaging in the field of medical illustration. I am super pleased to be able to welcome Andrew. Thank you.
I'm going to draw a sharp contrast between myself and Drew Barry. You've seen his work. Everyone who thinks it knows anything about medical illustration, Drew Barry actually does what everyone thinks we do. Okay, so that's Drew Barry, and I'm an empty shell of a man. I'm basically a squid in a suit. Okay, so, and I'm a dinosaur, really. And so what I'm doing is I'm passing around. I got some sketchbooks out there that are going around. And the title of my talk, I didn't realize this was happening until a couple of days ago. And oh, by the way, there are a couple of rules about giving a presentation. Don't ever apologize, which I just did. And then the other thing you always want to do when you're giving a lecture like this is if they put a lavalier mic on you, you know what that is? Like they pin it to you and give it a clip. You want to turn it off when you go to the bathroom. It's very important. Trust me. Very important to turn off the lavalier mic when you go to the bathroom, because it's always close by and it can still transmit. It's hell, people. All right. So the title of my talk is really, it's the archer, not the arrow. Everybody understands that, right? It's not about having a better piece of technology. It's really about what you're bringing to it. And I got to segue real quick. I love one of the last things that Drew said, which was, he wants all that complexity and all that accuracy to remain in the image. I love that. And it really bothers me in the marketing campaigns for so much of pharma, where they have dumbed down the lungs or the stomach or whatever. You almost can't tell what it is. And I think that's the wrong message. That might have been the right visual message 40 years ago when no one knew anything about science, but we have a the level of sophistication, at least visual sophistication, maybe not scientific sophistication, but the level of visual sophistication of our audience has gone up. And so I love that. All right, so that's got nothing to do with anything. I just want to let you know that I am an empty shell of a man, and I want you to, why is this not working? Oh, I know why. So, no, it's not working. Like with most things, this is where I say, Nick, we can do it like this if it doesn't work. Why is my cursor not? If I hit play and then I hit the next, oh, there it goes. There it goes. All right, it's working now. I don't know. I just show up and pay attention. That's all I do in life. So I do a lot of field sketching, meaning I've constantly got a sketchbook. I'm the one person who's always excited about getting on a plane because it means my phone won't work and I can sit down and draw for 3 hours while I fly across the country. And I draw almost exclusively in ink, and I draw mostly from memory. I'll look at something and then it'll fly by and I'll try to recreate it. So when I'm on the plane and people are walking by, so I'll sit in museums and and draw things. One thing I want to point out here is that if my drawings have flaws, every piece of art has a flaw. Most of my drawings I tend to make the head too large. And it's interesting, it's on animals and on people. And so you'll see that. This one does not. Everybody knows that if you want to make someone look heroic, what do you do in terms of their physical proportion? You make their head small, right? Superman looks like Superman. The Hulk looks like Hulk because their heads are tiny. I tried telling an ex-girlfriend one time that she was more beautiful because her head was tiny, and it didn't work. It was the wrong message. But I draw a lot from memory. If you look down here, I try to include in. People always wonder how big are these things, how long it take. So I go to museums and then afterwards I try to recreate that thing, whatever it was that I saw. I've gotten away from using the Copic markers because they explode on planes, and I'm always on a plane. But they are really a lot of fun. And a Copic marker is just an alcohol-based marker, and a ballpoint pen is an alcohol-soluble ink. And so I make these kind of broad, messy images. This image is about this big. It's on that small sketchbook. And then you go over it with the wash, and it just kind of comes to life a little bit. And eventually I'll probably get around to painting. I've been saying that for 30 years. I haven't gotten there yet. And I just like the act of sketching. I like to try to capture something, often from memory as much as I can, but the markers really are fun. I spent a lot of time in Grenada I spent a lot of time in Grenada at the medical school there, and working with the medical illustrators that are there, and I have a lot of sketches from there. This is a great recipe for anyone who likes Brussels sprouts. I'm not yelling, I'm just saying. Again, see the male figure? If you look at him, if you were to look at his head and measure it, his head is too big for his body. His head should be just a little bit smaller. He would look better. The rest of the figure is fine. Does anybody know where this is? This is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. It's the Death and the Sculptor. He was a famous sculptor and was cut down in his prime. It's a beautiful, beautiful sculpture. I love to go to zoos, and I usually knock off work and drive to Atlanta and go to the zoo. And it's, 5,000 kids and me. And I love a giraffe so much. Anybody spending time around giraffes? Male giraffes stink. They smell. They've got so many hormones. Apparently, they smell almost like oregano. They're very odd. So these are all done with ballpoint pen. So the ballpoint pen turns blue a little bit, and then this is some Copic marker. And I will do these standing, and I'll just work and work and work and work and work, and then I tend to put them away, and this is pretty much what you get. And what I would encourage you to do, I think everybody should draw. It's a great way to elaborate your ideas before you get in the computer. Again, the chicken it's nicely done. I'm very happy with it. The head's a little too big. It is. It's a little bit too big. It would look more like an actual rooster if it were if the head were the right size. And I think what people do, and the reason people are hesitant about sketching in ink is that they hold on to it a little too tightly, and they're worried that they make a mark. That mark's going to be there forever. That mark is going to be there forever. It is. And 5 seconds later, you're never going to see it because you're going to cover it up. Like you can see some of the lines where I'm trying to find parts of the image, and the faster you work, the less it'll bother you. That would be my advice. I got into calligraphy recently. I've also started drawing maps of Africa from memory. I'm not really sure why I do that, but I do it. Styrofoam is a really nice medium to draw on. You kind of engrave into it as you're going. Again, faster is better. And it's a nice little thing to you go out to dinner with a bunch of people, you grab someone's to-go box and send it back to them. They'll take it home and cut it out and keep it. It's kind of fun. But they kind of create, it almost ends up being like a bas relief a little bit. All right, enough of that. I tend to draw the same thing over and over again. I thought Nick was about to get the hook. And I draw people a lot. I draw a lot of faces. If you go through that medium-sized sketchbook, that's the one I've kind of settled on as the sketchbook for me. The small one's a little too small. And who has it? Can you hold it up real quick? The medium one, that's the small one. That's the medium one right there. and it becomes almost a square format when you open it up. And so one of the things I do is I'll draw people in, and there's kind of an art to how many times you're allowed to look at them before it becomes kind of weird, right? You know, I'm staring at another man across a restaurant. How you doing over there? And this guy thought I was staring at him across the restaurant. Actually, I was staring at him across the restaurant. And this actually was a good likeness, which is why I put it in here. But you can tell he's making direct eye contact with me. And I'm like, it's a restaurant. What's he going to do? Punch me? And then I started thinking, he might actually come over here. Airports are great places to draw people because they're either in line or they're on their phone or they're asleep. And traveling's hard on people. And so it's not a pretty sight. It's ugly. But yeah, the phone immobilizes people. They're not looking at you. They're looking at their phone and they're perfectly still. And so I know it looks like Genghis Khan. It's not. This is a very good, not all my drawings are good likeness. In fact, most of them are not a good likeness. Obviously, we're all trying to get a likeness. This is a very good likeness of this guy. And I was in the airport. I was there early. We're all sitting around. The flight was delayed, blah, 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 blah. So I had some time to work on the drawing. He ended up sitting right behind me. I wanted to work on the drawing, but it's not really a flattering portrait, you know. He never said anything, but this is what I do. You guys should stop me and ask me questions as I go, okay? If you want. I go to Irish music once a week as a, yes, question.
I was just, how long do you spend drawing like one of these ones?
So I would do a couple of these in an hour and a half. This would be 15 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that. It's in ink, so everything that goes down stays there. You're not picking anything back up. Anybody know who this is? Any of the medical illustrators in the crowd know who this is? Cameron Sladen. So I think it looks like Cameron a little bit. How about that guy? He doesn't really come to the meetings anymore. Keith Casnot. That's Ryan Kingsling over there. So it's fun. It's really fun. That's Rick Baker. It's really fun to try to draw people. And when you finally get it, I mean, sometimes it does start to feel like a superpower. This woman was very angry. All right. So that's that. Yes.
What part of the face do you start with?
I start with the shape. And you know what's funny? Because you brought it up, I just started. I just went to a figure sculpture class in Las Vegas that was through the AMI. Can I move this thing over the way? I can't. Can I? And it was really valuable. It was such a valuable experience. And there were 10 or 12 of us, John Martini, Dave Kilpack, a bunch of people, and I just loved it. And this is the sculpture that I finished at the end of the week. And I think the reason I was a little better at it than the other people in the class, and I think it's because I do so. I mean, I was. There's no sense. It just came out a little better. Does that sound bad? Is that bad? And I think it's because I draw so much, and drawing pays off so much in my job. Like I do it all day at work. Like I model, paint, draw, render all day long digitally. And then I knock off work and I pick up Sketchbook and I'm just doing that. And it's my dad says I have hypergraphia, right? I'm just drawing all the time, but I love it. It really makes me very happy. But so when we got to the sculpture class, and I think it's that sculpture and drawing are so similar. They're kind of the same thing. You know, it's not about the arrow. It's about the archer. It's about how you see form, how you think about form, what are the proportions of things, and how are you going to put it all together and make it work? And also fearlessness. What is the scariest thing in the world? It is a white piece of paper and a pen. That is the scariest thing in the world. Sitting down and committing to making a mark with ink on a piece of white paper is terrifying, because, you know, the only thing that's going on that paper is something you put on there, you know? And I think drawing is such a rewarding thing for me. And it's just interesting that sculpting became such a similar thing. And so now I'm going to go in here and let's see here. Any other questions? So a couple of years ago, I'm not a couple of years, many years ago, I realized that I was not submitting work to the salon that I really was happy with at the AMI. And I decided to start making work that I wanted to see in the salon, that represented the work that I wanted to do. So I did several projects and put them in the salon over the years that didn't have a client. I just did them for myself, and this is one of them. And I worked on it while I was teaching. And I did the sketches for it over the course of a couple of weeks, maybe a month. And it actually, most of it got painted in a couple of days because I was a poor planner back then. I've become a much better illustrator now, much better about budgeting my time. So this whole thing happened very quickly. Some little things to note about this as you go through it. First of all, back to what Drew said, is he really gets excited about the science of it. I love the science. I read something recently that on a Golgi apparatus, from the forming phase to the maturing phase, from the nucleus side to the cell membrane side, the membranes of the Golgi apparatus get thicker as you move towards the membrane. I love that kind of stuff, you know? And the only way you learn it is by hanging out with people like Drew. I don't get to hang out with Drew. I only get to see him like once every 3 or 4 years. That's it. More than that, we'd have a problem. No. I've actually taken to reading an encyclopedia, and a histology encyclopedia. It's the nerdiest thing I've ever done in my life, but it's written by Christic. Do y'all have the Christic book here? Do you have his encyclopedia? It's a thinner book. It's got smaller images. You almost need a magnifying glass to see them because the plates are probably this big and they shrank them down to this big to get in the book. But anyhow, I've been reading that. It's fascinating. And one of the things that he says is that the fallopian tube moves the egg, moves the ovum to the uterus by peristaltic wave. The cilia don't really move the egg. You wouldn't know that unless you had a savant that came through and told you that. So he, reading that book, I learned such interesting things. He said the cilia might just function to orient the sperm. Who would have thought that? But anyhow, so I tried to keep this. I did this image first. I did this image during a meeting, and really, this is the whole story right here for me. And I like the idea of this arc passing all the way through the story. And so this arc passes right through. Let me see that white dot there. There's a white dot right there. That's the egg. And the egg is actually, with the cumulus cells, is about the size of a grain of salt. You can see it with all the extra cells around. It's pretty big. And I wanted to try to push that, to try to make it visible in the poster. And when it's printed and you're there, you can definitely see it at this size. The resolution of this monitor is not quite that, but this is the first grayscale representation. I really wanted to get that thing about the sperm moving against the concentration gradient, against the moving towards the egg. And I had this, I really like this little sketch of the cumulus cells around. It just didn't work in the final. It's like that thing when you start watercolor painting and you make some color on your palette and you're like, I love that color. It's going on that painting. One way or another, it's going on that painting. And that's not the right way to do it, right? The story should tell you what it is. But this is the single piece of paper where I worked out all the different things. There's this really interesting thing my father actually told me about called a Mittelschmerz. I mean, can we speak German? It means, Schmerz means pain. And it's a pain, a woman that can feel the pain of her ovum bursting. Crazy pains. Unbelievable. It's called a Mittelschmerz. It said it's rare, but it happens. And then the fallopian tube has these weird concentric, the muscle layers. And this is pretty common for peristalsis everywhere. Longitudinal and concentric. That didn't make it into the final. This is the broad ligament that wraps over. That didn't end up in there. But this image, the dominant image, the very first thing I came up with was kind of the hook, the visual hook for the whole thing. And I'd already started to lay these things out. My point is, drawing was the way to solve it. So then I made high resolution drawings in graphite on marker paper. They're about this big. Scanned them in, and then masked them out. Right? I use layer masks instead of paths for the most part. It's one of the few things that a Cintiq is really much better for. If you're doing a ton of Photoshop work and a ton of masking, it's worth doing. It's worth having. And then I went through and painted it. And again, I always try to, Keith Casnot was always big on this. He always wanted bright white and inky black next to one another at the center of interest, if you can do it, right? Painters do it too. They try to find the corner of the nose, the pupil, something like that, little white spot on the tip of the nose. So I really wanted that egg to be, again, I'm trying to push it to make that egg visible as you're going. There's a bunch of stuff in this image that I like. It just didn't fit in the final image, and I couldn't get it in there. Talk about crazy. The fallopian tube moves over the ovary to find the follicle as it ruptures to hoover it up. I mean, it's just, you couldn't invent a better system. And so I'm trying to get at that here with these little arrows. I guess what I'm getting at with this is that if you go to 3D too soon, you can't think fast enough to do this, and you get hindered by and I'm very adept at ZBrush now. I still couldn't make these things fast enough. I could draw them so much faster than I could do it in 3D. So let's zip through some of this, because yeah, so there you can see the little white, and I like that it lined up right with this black line as it cut through it. And so how would you, so let's say you don't have 3D. Now I would build this in ZBrush. I'd build this. How did I do this back in the day? Give me a look at that, instantly tell. You draw this cut flat, right? And you have all the fun making all the little, you know, because it's really like a meshwork of the whole thing. And everybody gets this wrong when they illustrate it. They make it like a garden hose. It's not. There's tons and tons. It's a miracle that egg can get through. You know, it really is. And it makes you realize why a disease like chlamydia or something, which causes scarring, think about how little inflammation you'd need to get those two things to knit together and never come apart, you know? But anyhow, so what I did was I drew that thing like this. I skewed it in Photoshop. Everybody's nodding their head, they're getting it. And then I draw, but no, that's great. That's great. And then I drew the lines, the perspective lines going back in space. So right here, back, it goes back, it goes back. And then I went through and I drew all these tiny little things in here, all those tiny cells, all the way along, right? Masked it out, magic wand. It helps to be careful. I thought I had other slides which showed how I did the embossing, but it's basically just, you know how to do embossing. Again, now you'd probably build this. Oh yeah, I do have it. And so I drew all those. It took, tedious doesn't even begin. But you can see it starting to come to life. So this is before I did the embossing, and embossing is a super simple trick. You basically just use color range or magic wanding or whatever to get a spot of black in the center of that. You blur it. So it's 100% black in the center and it fades out to 0 on the sides. You hit the emboss filter and it does that. And it's it's best used when it's a subtle effect. There's a ton of cleanup in here that you can do. You're never going to see it. Think about how small those white edges are in the final. And to Drew's point, if it's good enough, it's good enough. Same things here. It was interesting, the morphologic differences between the two parts of the tube, which are really only that far apart. Because, whoops, what did I do? What did I do? This is where fertilization happens in the ampulla. And as you get down here, it's not about this thing's fertilized. It needs to get down to the uterus as soon as possible. And again, there's that egg right there. And I wanted the whitest thing next to the blackest thing. And with most of my work, I really like it much better in black and white than I do in color, almost always. I just, you know, Seurat said, if I could have confined myself to black and white, I would have. I love that. Anyhow, this is a hidden, it's starting to look like an animal there, some kind of weird animal. It's neither here nor there. And then this one was the same thing. And I thought it was neat that this one stuck pretty close to that in the final. Sometimes with embossing, again, now you build all this stuff, you wouldn't emboss it, but you'd have to emboss this strip to get the light coming from this way, and emboss this strip with the light coming from this way, and emboss this. Otherwise, it looks like if you emboss the whole thing at once, it looks like a pizza. It does. I mean, that's what it does. So This is it. All right, let's get out of here. This is, oh, so no, there's a little bit more. Well, yeah, so watch how, see how rich these are. And so this is another place where the Cintiq really helps, because you can get in here and draw this. And you can find the form as you're drawing it, and really you're moving pretty quickly. Come back and hit the highlights. So you're hitting highlights here, all, you know, the whitest whites. But it's so rich right now. The darks are so rich, right? This thing is, the follicle's ruptured, the blood is coming out, the fluid, and this one egg is moving into the, this is looking very Dune all of a sudden. Any questions? I like it less in, I like it less in color. Yes.
Have you ever used like tablet, like iPad for digital stuff, or is it always been?
I tried it very briefly when it first came out, and it just wasn't, it just didn't do it. And the truth is, now I work so much in ZBrush, I don't really need the Cintiq so much, and I can get by with the tablet again. It was the masking and lassoing. If you've got a bunch of Photoshop work to do, a big Cintiq is better. It really is. A bunch of drawing, if you need to draw digitally. And most ZBrush work is not that. It's sculpting, and it's not as, it doesn't require the same level of finesse. Yeah. Yes. Which ones? These?
Yes.
No. So this is, I'm sorry, this is a black, I'm sorry, I thought that was evident. This is a black and white drawing. Anything that's white or black is done in Photoshop. And I should have the, yeah, so the sketch was in there. The sketch was, that sketch is, bear with me 1 second. That sketch is here or here. That is that sketch. That's a piece of paper about this big. Yep. Yep. Sorry, I should have made that clear. Any other questions? Yes. Peritoneum. Well, the neat thing, this is peritoneum. I mean, and the advice is it's basically like Tyvek. You know what Tyvek is? Tyvek is a plastic paper that's what FedEx envelopes are. If you look at it, it's basically very thin fibers which are pushed together, right? And so that's what I try to do here. And it's a matter of it has thinnest white hash lines you can that are at right angles to one another. That's my, and also that follow the form. And the trick with the fallopian tube and skewing it, you'd think that you could just draw it skewed to begin with. I draw it very well. I can't get it right. It will look better if I draw it square and then skew it. And there's this magical thing about how those lines compress with perspective that you can't, my brain just can't figure it out entirely by itself. I can get close, but it looks better if I do it. So that's pretty much, let me see if that's it. There are some hero shots of and again, the reason there are so many pieces of this in black and white and so few of them in color is that I don't really like the color as much. I don't think it looks as good. I think this has a lot more impact. You know, you concentrate much more on the story. And I think the same thing about photography. Next time your family's together, shoot black and white photographs of those people and somebody's bright red shirt next to someone's bright green shirt. You won't see any of that stuff. You know, you just see the people. You see what they're eating. You see what they're doing. Yes.
I was like, and I think an important part of your workflow here, right, is that you get the drawing right in grayscale. And then
Absolutely,
color,
yeah.
And then the color is a separate layer in color, right, in Photoshop.
And if I did it in color from the beginning, if I was a painter, right, instead of a draftsman, which is what I am, then I would probably be happier with the color. You know, probably work better. No. Because once you've established, and that's probably what it is, the reds that I needed for this to be the warms, the rich colors, they're not this dark. So you then have to do a levels adjustment to bring it up. And now you've lost your range. You've compressed all that stuff together. I see everybody nodding, they're getting it. There was another question in the back. Okay, yeah. So there's more of the fascia in there. And again, the trick is to work pretty quickly. You can see some of these are, you can really see that a person did it, you know. And then you can do little Photoshop tricks like I wanted this to look fat and greasy over here. And so I blurred it. Change the quality of the highlight on it. So that's it. All right, so let's move on and I'll show you some of the other stuff. I got about 15 minutes left. Is that right? You tell me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm making this up as I go. I got about 2 hours of sleep left. See, it's more of what you do. I make excuses for everything I do. What is this? Yeah. So most of what I do is on a day-to-day basis throughout the time I've had the company was illustration. I made illustrations every day, and I would usually make on average about 2 illustrations a day. And that's what I mean. Think about it. We've had the company for 16 years. Take 3,500 illustrations and divide by, you know, it's a lot. And the lecture that I keep wanting people to ask me to give is my lecture about workflow, and it doesn't get very good penetration. That's what you need. Trust me. You need to know, because some of you will end up in jobs where you need to make a whole bunch of illustrations. How do you track them? How do you deliver them? You know, how do you handle adjustments? Where do you store the comments? Because what happens is there are 15 people on a project. They're all going to send you a PowerPoint file with comments about your illustration. You are the one who has to put all those together and come up with another illustration, which you're getting paid $600 for. Okay. If you spend an hour putting all the comments together, you have officially and completely lost money on that job. And so what I did was I came up with a workflow, and I'm going to show you. I feel like I'm having to cheat to show you this, but I'm going to show you anyhow. And let's see here. Nope, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it either. Hang on. Let me see here. Toronto. Phillips, not Phillips. Bear with me. Somebody asked me a question. This is it. I found it. I'm a genius. My God. All right. So what this is the document, a Google Slides document, where I assign, where illustrations are assigned, developed, reviewed, and slated for delivery and approval. Okay. And all communication happens here. So this slide for this illustration, that I've got a file naming system too, is where everybody comes to work on this image. So it's as if this slide was a room. If you want to work on this illustration, you want to comment on this illustration, you want to find it and put it in your final deliverable, whoever, every single person on the project, they have to go into this room in order to work. All comments have to be here. All reference materials have to be here. All links have to be here. If you send me an email, you're going to get a nastygram with a link to the Google Doc and say, hey, please put this in the Google Doc. Because if I have to go sort through it and find things, something's going to get lost. I'm going to have to do something twice, and I'm going to lose money on the job. And it doesn't help anybody. All previous versions of this illustration are off to the left. And they're buffered. Meaning, everyone assume what I mean when I say buffered. Between each illustration are the comments. This workflow, if you can institute something like this, will save your life, because the client will find an error that you made at 4:30 on a Friday when you're trying to go to the beach, and you got to make that find that illustration and change it right then. And you're not going to get paid for fixing your own mistakes, by the way, which happen. We all make mistakes. But this way, you know where everything is. This is the nexus where all the projects are happen. I've been doing this. I've been refining this process for 15 years. We have it down to a science, and our whole team uses it. Saves us a ton of. This is where money is made in low budget illustration work, and there is money to be made, but you'll never make money on it if you screw it up. And screwed up by meaning you don't know where things are. At the beginning up here, this is where the final delivered files would live. And lately I've been putting in the build files as well. So those all live somewhere else. All right, everybody that works on the project, all that stuff. But I'm happy to give you another lecture some other time online. Let's do it online if you want. Let me show you some other stuff that I do. Any of the questions at the moment? Back when ZBrush was just getting going, I don't even know that it had the functionality, any of the functionality it did then. We didn't have Z-Remesher, we didn't have Dynamesh. You basically had to create a sphere and kind of sculpt it as best you can, but it was still really useful. And I made some, it took me years. I don't know about everybody else. It took me years before I could use ZBrush in production. And this was one of the first pieces that I did. And I modeled the layers of the retina. And then I took them into Photoshop and just painted on top of them because I couldn't figure out how to color them and render them and get that red wax to go away. And then the eye image at the top is, again, I like to draw. I'm good at it. I can do it. There's no reason for me to draw the perspective necessary in this. We're not doing that anymore. So build that rather than draw it. And in many cases, what you're going to build is this. No, that's not it. It's this. No, it's not that. This is it right here. That's it, right? So this is what I used. And then once you have it, you can even magic wand this plane versus that plane. And you can rebuild that whole thing in Photoshop pretty easily. I may have rendered some of it. I don't really remember. Most of it was painted. This is an interesting problem. And this is a very common problem that we have. They'll come to you and say, hey, we have a histology image that we need. Can you make this for us? Or we can't license it. Well, I don't want to go to send that money to a stock house. I want to make that money. And so I figured out a way. This is an entirely Photoshop generated image, completely. And this is back before any AI. And it's all done with layer styles. So this little hollow, see that thing in there and how it's slightly blurred? It has smart objects. So you can make a smart object out of something and then blur the smart object. And it has a radial blur. So part of it was looking at an actual fundus photography and trying to decipher what is it that makes it look real. Now, what are the advantages of doing this over fundus photography? For the learner, think about this. The only thing that changes between these two images is the pathology. Everything else is exactly the same. So just from a person who has to scan across that image and find how they're different, which is what you're doing between normal and pathology, you see it like that. And we tell them, we say, listen, you need to put a disclaimer that runs with this. It says, this is not an actual photograph, because it's not. And I had, there was someone, I can't remember his name, Craig Luce went through and he criticized some of these vessels in here in the center are too random. They're supposed to come, I think they come and they straighten up a little bit as they come into the macula. So he can go to hell. How many people work in ZBrush? Not everybody. Oh, interesting. Oh. ZBrush is a lot of fun. You never know what you're going to get. You know, there is some uncanny valley of the uncanny valley. It's just some amazing things. I don't even have to look at them. I've seen them so often. And some of them are very strange. And here's my rule about working in ZBrush. When it happens, you're not allowed to do anything except screen grab it. You can position it, but you can't turn anything else on. None of these are contrived. These are things that I'm just working along, minding my own business. I want to remind you, I'm trying to work. And this is what, oh my God, that woman is so bad. I mean, come on. You feel my pain on this or not? No? I don't even know what that is. Right? How does this happen? You hide a model, you unhide part of it, you rotate it, boom, you out. It's bad. It's bad. I'll show you a couple more and then that's the layer slider. Grab the layer slider. It'll say, oh, you want a toe? I'll get you a toe. I mean, that one's kind of cool. I don't know what was going on that day. All right, so that's the fun part of the talk. All right, so I got a little bit more time. Let me see what I'm going to go over next. Let's do some of this stuff. There's a talk on, so this is a good one. So this, we think about, why is that like that? All right, so we think about using 3D to obviously to make the images. In this case, I used the 3D to understand the procedure that they were trying to illustrate. I'm very happy with how the illustration came out, but dealing with the surgeon in our first phone call was a soup sandwich. It was, this isn't a workable solution. Let me show you where we started. We started with this, and this actually came from another illustrator. And this was what I had to work on. And I didn't have a lot more than this. And I met with the surgeon the first time. It was a surgeon and his chief resident, all the other residents. And the chief surgeon is not the one who does the procedure the most. The chief resident's the one who's actually in there, getting it done. And they were wonderful to work with, but it was just confusing. So what I did, when this is very early on with Dynamesh, this is a long time ago. I'm just going to let this play. And basically what I did was I created a series of models and I went through and cut them up as I thought the surgery was done and had several versions of them. And I'm actually drawing on the models over a video call as we're doing it. It's first cut, second cut, third cut, first cut, that kind of thing. And a really interesting thing happened. There was an aha moment for me. The surgeon and his chief resident started arguing. Not they weren't mad. And he was like, we don't do it that way. He's like, I think the surgeon said, that's wrong. We don't make that cut there. And the resident said, yeah, we do. And the surgeon said, we do. He said, yeah, we do. And so by going through and doing this, I help them understand their own procedure. I don't, it's not a job. I mean, it was how else would they see this? They see it in surgery, in the blood and the gore and the patient trying to die on them and, all this other stuff going on. And some of them may be doing parts of the procedure one day and then the next day they're doing it on a different vertebral level. This equalizes all of that. And I was able to go through and make it for them and also help me because now I have something that I can really work with. And there are much better tools for this now, for doing this now. Things like this that now we can do with live Booleans in ZBrush, where you basically can make these things and they come out just beautifully. They work really, really well. And I don't know about y'all, but I never use Boolean. Do you use Booleans in Cinema 4D? Occasionally. I could never really get them to work. This is a fun one. So, I made an accurate heart. Tried to make as accurate a heart model as I could, inside and out. Those faces are actually reverse facing the other way. So let me stop this right here. Oops. Oh. All right. So in amyloidosis, most of the problematic hypertrophy of the left ventricle is at the midpoint here. And it really narrows the lumen in the middle. And this was the goal. The goal was to make this thing for a poster it was going to be. And I'm like, oh man, I got this. Because one of the cool things about the left ventricle is if you cut it at just the right angle, you can really see that it's round. It's really round in cross section. And that helps because although the motion is kind of a ringing motion when it beats, but the function at the lumen is that it does that. Right? And amyloidosis is a problem because it makes the wall thick and it can't beat properly and blah, 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 blah. So I said, I'll just cut it here. They're going to love it. Guess what? They didn't love it. But I solved an interesting problem because the first time I cut it, it didn't look right. It was too hollow because it didn't have any of the chordae tendineae that run through there. And I'm like, well, how am I going to do that? And it just dawned on me, I'll just make another Boolean. So the other Boolean are the chordae tendineae, which are here, and they're just chopped off with a Boolean, right? And they're sticking in the lumen. I can grab them and I can move them wherever I want. And they're cut by the Boolean. And you can paint, you're not painting none of this painting is on the heart, it's on the Boolean. And so when you're moving those chordae tendineae around, they're moving through that painting, so they still have texture, they still look correct. Client hated it because they'd never seen it this way. No one illustrates the heart like this. They hated it. And they went to the standard thing where they cut magically through all the great vessels and all the ventricles and all the atria of the heart. The heart, you can't make a cut through the heart that does that. I wish I had that image there. Yeah, client. So the takeaway is, don't ever make things correct. Occasionally I'll use, they were asking about a scan earlier. Occasionally I'll use Osirix or Horos. I'm sure you all have available, have the ability to use that to make there's some great stuff in here, right? This is the back, this is towards the back here. It's flat. That's the smooth muscle, right? So those rings do this. And we actually got a model out of this that we could use as a starting point. Even if it just gives you the rough shape, that's a huge advantage in ZBrush. And now you can use the tools to go through and do it. All right, I got about 5 more minutes. What do you think?
Sure, yeah.
All right, I'll go as long as you want. I'll do this all day. I love building things like this. It's a fun challenge. It's fun to try to get it right and make it look fancy and get all the detail and everything in there. Let me show you this. And because ZBrush has such good tools for symmetry, I can make a 3-sided radial symmetry for the valves and then come down here. And if I need to adjust these, actually, that's how I drew them. I turn on symmetry. I turn the count up to the number of them all the way around. And now when I grab them, they'll all move at once, right? And it has really good tools for drawing. So when I drew that out and it snapped right on there. I don't remember how it got off to begin with, how it got all screwed up, and they really do. They sew these. Someone has to go through and sew those things on, I guess. I don't know what this is. I have no idea what that is. Let's see here. Blah, 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 blah. ZBrush 3 with 3 examples. Any questions? Yes.
When you use your Google slide thing for people to put comments in.
Yeah.
Is there any way for you to mark up the images as well? Like,
Yes, this works just like any PowerPoint or anything else. So often what I'll do is I'll make an arrow for them. I try to get my clients to always leave their comments in red. If they put something in there in black, I might not even see it, So yeah, they mark it up, then they tag me and everybody else that's supposed to be tagged on it. It varies a little bit on which step of the process we are. If it's being approved, the copywriter needs to be the one tagged. The project managers on the client side and on our side are always tagged. There's kind of an art to it. We've got a whole process for who gets tagged when. But they can absolutely mark it out. Some of them are very adept at it, have gotten very good at it, because it saves them time too. They don't want to have to go through their email and try to figure out which PowerPoint file it was and do all. Nobody wants to do that. It doesn't serve any purpose whatsoever, other than everyone is already doing it that way. This is a much better way to do it. They have to have a Google account and they have to be logged in as Google. If you're worried about a client breaking something, we don't worry about that. You could give them comment only privileges so they can only leave a comment. We've never really had a problem with that. One thing I want to tell you is that I think because I draw a lot, I feel very comfortable drawing with the clients. Let me tell you why that's important. When I work with a client, what you want from your clients is you want to build a rapport with them. You want to be their friend. You want to be the person who solves their problem. You want to be the best phone call they have every day is talking to you. That's what you want, right? If I draw with my clients, they say, oh, we want to do this poster and it's going to have a vessel. We want a vessel in it. We want to talk about febrile neutropenia. I say, well, why don't I sketch some things out? When you start drawing with them, they realize you're out on a limb and it's like somebody speaking. Nobody wants to see a speaker get up and say, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm late. Nobody wants that. Everybody wants to see a speaker that's confident, has their shit together. And your clients will do that too. Your clients, that's how you get buy-in. You work with them. You do a little extra for them. And one of the things you do is you build stuff for them. Got to be prepared. You got to know the science before the call starts, that sort of thing. But if you can make an image during that call, guess what happens? When they leave that call, that image is in their mind, right? Not their image, your image is in their mind. And they'll come up, they'll diverge from that, but they will make a derivation of that image. And so it already keeps you moving along. One thing that was a revelation to me was that when a client hires you to make an illustration, they expect you to know how to do it, not just make the image. How are you going to deliver the image? How are you going to review the image? How are you going to get, where's the image going to live? You need to have all that stuff worked out. If they ask you, you need to know, you got to have a plan. That's part of your job. It's not just making the art. It's about knowing the entirety of the process. When are you going to bill? How are you going to bill? You can bill it all up front, all at the end, 50-50, 20, 30, whatever, that sort of thing. Any other questions? That's about an hour.